I would like to officially welcome you all to today's webinar titled Strategies for Supporting Newcomer and Immigrant Families, Navigating the School System. And this is being brought to you in partnership with our friends from the Institute for Educational Leadership. My name is Anthony Salas, and I am the Senior Manager of Events and Membership with Welcoming America. And before we get started, just a few quick things to go over with you. First of all, for those of you that may not be familiar with Welcoming America, I just want to tell you a little bit about our organization. We are a national nonprofit, and we work with various communities all across the country that are leading a movement of inclusive communities working to ensure that everyone belongs and that they are valued contributors to success within those communities that they are in. Our member network is made up of nearly 300 nonprofit and government organizations from across the country who benefit from expert coaching, strategy planning, and access to member-only events and resources, as well as diverse and practical communities of practice. So again, if you're not familiar with our organization and would like to learn more, I invite you to visit welcomingamerica.org. And now just a few quick housekeeping items. Before we begin, along the bottom of your screen, you will see various features that are available to you today, and just want to note some of those. The chat feature for today has been disabled. However, the Q&A function is available. So at any point during today's presentation, if you have questions related to the content that will be shared, please use that feature to enter your question, and we will be addressing as many questions as time allows at the very end of today's presentation. The other thing to note is that we also have the closed captioning option that is available to you. So again, if you would like to utilize that feature, just click the icon there, and that will be enabled on your personal view on your computer. The duration for today's webinar is 90 minutes, and it is being recorded. We do realize that maybe you will not be able to stay on for the entire time. Everyone is very busy. And if you are not able to do so, just know that you will get a link to the full recording along with any resources that we note during the webinar before the end of this week, guaranteed. So again, whether you can stay on with us or not, we will be sharing that recording out by the end of this week. All right, and that is it for housekeeping. So now we're going to get into it. I'm excited and very honored to introduce you all to the amazing speakers that are joining us for today's very timely and insightful discussion. So starting with our first speaker, who is going to be Kwesi Rollins. He is the Senior Vice President of Leadership and Engagement with the Institute for Educational Leadership, or IEL. We'll also be hearing from Sabrina Sheikh, who is the Immigrant and Refugee Leadership Coordinator, also with IEL. In addition, we'll hear from Olivia Heibach, who is a Regional Manager with Welcoming America. We'll also be hearing from Maria Fernandez, Parent University Coordinator with Washoe County School District out of Reno, Nevada. Hortensia Hernandez, who is a Client Engagement Associate with the National Center for Community Schools. Nora Morales, who is the Program Director for Identity. Amber McCorkle, who is the Director of Educational Programs with Clarkston Community Center. And Laura Gardner, the founder and CEO of Immigrant Connections. And once again, just a big thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for this presentation today. I'm going to stop my screen sharing now, and I'm going to turn it over to Kwesi to talk a little bit about IEL.
Thanks so much, Anthony, and welcome everyone to this very important webinar. I'm Kwesi Rollins, Senior Vice President for Leadership and Engagement at the Institute for Educational Leadership. And we are a national nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., home for the Coalition for Community Schools, home for the District Leaders Network on Family and Community Engagement, headquarters of the RAMP, Ready to Achieve Mentoring Program, which works with which works with youth with disabilities. I got my programs mixed up. Youth with disabilities in partnership with many communities around the country to help them have a smoother transition into the workforce. We also have a project that Sabrina leads, that she'll talk a little bit about, called Leaders of Tomorrow, which works with a variety of communities to really focus on the healthy development and youth leadership of students who happen to be immigrant and refugee youth. So lots of connections at IEL. We're really in the connection business and the connection and convening business, and really excited for this relatively new partnership with Welcoming America on an issue that is not only critically important, but as we think about our own constituencies around the country, which are school districts, state offices of education, all kinds of community-based partners and others who are very much concerned with improving outcomes for young people and creating environments where young people and frankly in families and communities can thrive. We know that many of the things that you're going to hear from these wonderful panelists today are part of the nuts and bolts of creating the right environment for thriving and for a bright future for all of us. So we've got a dynamic panel. I'm going to sit back and listen to them, listen and learn, and encourage you to send your questions into the Q&A and have a wonderful webinar. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kwesi. Appreciate that. We are now going to hear from my colleague, Olivia Habach, who is going to talk a little bit about how this affects some of our network here with Welcoming America, and also just kind of give a little bit of a setup to the next part which will be our panel discussion with our other speakers. So Olivia, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Hello, and thank you all so much for being here today, both to our panelists and attendees. My name is Olivia Habach, as Anthony mentioned, and I act as the Northeast Regional Manager with Welcoming America, which means I provide support to our members in the Northeast, part of the Mid-Atlantic, and across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. And before I hand it over to our panel of illustrious speakers, I'm going to give some brief, I promise, remarks on the importance of supporting immigrant and refugee families in navigating the school system. For many newcomers, the first opportunity to connect with others is through the school system. If you've ever moved to a new community with school-age children, you may have found that your children starting school or heading back to school was the catalyst for community building in the place you landed in. I know that was certainly the case for my family. And some newcomer families are navigating an unfamiliar community system, some of them with the additional challenges of navigating a system that's not set up to provide services in a language they speak fluently. By creating systems where all, including refugees and immigrant students and their families, can belong and thrive, you're creating a strong foundation for not only academic success on the part of students, but also for the family's longer-term economic and social success. When we create welcoming schools, children succeed and communities thrive. And there's an opportunity to gain trust and confidence in systems navigation for newcomer families, which is another critical piece for a family's long-term success in their new community. In fact, we at Welcoming America believe that welcoming schools are such a critical piece of the broader community welcoming infrastructure that education is one of the 7 framework areas under the Welcoming Standard. If you'd like to learn more about the Welcoming Standard and about the Certified Welcoming designation, you can visit certifiedwelcoming.org. That's not the point of today's webinar. Education as a framework area is defined thusly. In welcoming communities, the education system ensures all students, including immigrant students, have the support they need to thrive in school and the knowledge they need to succeed in the workforce. Schools and community education programs are informed by the needs and priorities of immigrant students and families, and they're accessible to all residents, including immigrants. Welcoming and inclusion efforts are not siloed within a single school or program, but incorporated into the schools and school districts that serve the community. I'm going to hand it back to the speakers now, but I hope that this has given you a bit of background on the critical place education and school systems serve within broader community welcoming infrastructure and how important it is to support immigrant and refugee families navigating the school system.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Olivia, and for really setting the context for today's conversation. Hello, my name is Sabrina Sheikh, and I am with the Institute for Educational Leadership, where I lead our youth leadership and advocacy work. I just wanted to quickly mention one of the programs that Kwesi did talk about, which is our Leaders of Tomorrow program. It is an immigrant and refugee leadership program that was co-created by immigrant and refugee youth across the country that really builds their skill sets in leadership development and civic engagement so they can be active agents in society, in their schools and in their communities. So just wanted to mention that. And if you all ever want to know more information, we have a guidebook that is on the IEL website. With that being said, like I said, thank you so much, Olivia, for just setting the stage for today's conversation, right? Really, how do we support our newcomer and immigrant families to navigate the school system? And what does that look like? And so today we have an amazing panelists that all work in different areas and places within the United States that'll be able to give you guys various contexts around the work that they're doing, some of the best practices and challenges that also occur as we do this work. And so with that, I would love to give an opportunity to all the panelists to just kind of give a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, and where you're at. We can kick it off with Laura going first.
Great, thanks. Wasn't sure who's going first. Thanks so much, Sabrina, and everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to be here today. I'm Laura Gardner. I am the founder of an organization called Immigrant Connections. We are based in Washington, D.C., and we really focus on that capacity building side of this work. In other words, we do teacher trainings, K-12 teacher trainings all throughout the United States, working with educators and school systems, kind of thinking of the systems piece too, on how to best work with immigrant and refugee students and families. The reason why I founded Immigrant Connections is because there are a lot of trainings out there already, but they tend to focus on kind of seeing students as English learners. And everything seems to be kind of focused on that English language acquisition side of working with students or even working with families. And we really wanted to put together an organization that looked at everything else, right? The family engagement piece, understanding the systems like the refugee resettlement system or the system for unaccompanied youth, any of those types of immigration systems that our students and families are involved with. So anyway, that's a little teeny tiny snapshot of what we do. And again, we thank you for inviting us here today.
Amber, would you like to go next?
Yes, I was taking notes actually from what Laura was saying. Good afternoon. My name is Amber McCorkle. I'm the Director of Education and Programs with the Clarkston Community Center. We're a nonprofit located in Clarkston, Georgia, which is a part of the Metro Atlanta area. Our mission and focus is on community building and connecting communities through education, recreation, the arts, and advocacy. And so education, of course, especially what we're going to talk about today, really blends into what we do.
Maria, would you like to go next?
Hey everyone, I'm Maria Fernandez. I'm from Reno, Nevada. I work in Washoe County School District. My work is around family engagement and a little bit about the district that I'm coming from. We serve about 59,000 students in Washoe County out of 102 schools, and 102 schools that are located in a diverse geographically area. We are about 600 miles that we serve. So we have some rural, not a lot, but we do have some rural parts of the area that we serve, as well as more of the inner cities. Out of the 59,000 students, we have about 14% multilingual learners. So our kids that are not only practicing their English, but also come with different languages from their current schools that they're coming from different countries. And out of that number, and we go drilling a little bit more, 840 of our multilingual learners are immigrant students, 252 newcomer students from last year, and 137 refugee students. And we have about 24 different languages spoken in our district, which is amazing, and we can definitely see the diversity. My role is specifically family engagement, and we look at not only building capacity of our families to navigate a complex system, but also build capacity of our staff to really truly work with our students that are coming from other countries and make them feel welcome in our schools.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. Nora, would you like to go next?
Hola, buenas tardes. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nora Morales, and I work at Identity Inc. We are located in Gaithersburg, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. We serve over 14,000 clients a year. We're a youth development organization that has three major focus areas. One is K through 12 education, another is trauma-informed services, and the third is youth opportunities and workforce development. We partnered with Montgomery County government about 3 years ago during the pandemic, and we have a project called Bienvenidos that is set up to welcome all immigrants into Montgomery County. We handle the education and the case management side of the Bienvenidos project, and I'll be happy to talk more about that when we have our panel.
Thank you, Nora. And last but not least, Hortensia, can you go last?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Hortensia Hernandez. I am currently the Client Engagement Associate with the National Center for Community Schools, but I will be really talking a lot more on my previous roles for the past 7 years as a community school coordinator and community school supervisor in the Caldwell School District in Caldwell, Idaho. We really used the community school strategy in our district as an opportunity to create infrastructures and systems that enable thriving conditions for all of our students. And that really allowed for us to seek partnerships and seek opportunities for impact through our partners in the community, especially that could then target our immigrant families. And I'll be sharing a little bit how we work with our immigrant population, and also what the obstacles that we face in being able to serve the refugee population because of logistics and limited opportunities. But thank you, everybody, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And so now let's jump right on into the questions. So the first question is for you, Maria. What are some of the roles and responsibilities of district leaders when it comes to family and community engagement, really around supporting newcomer and immigrant families navigating the school system?
I see ourselves as having many roles, but because of the time, I'll try to be a little bit brief. And also, as an immigrant myself, I always apply, what are the things that I wish I knew or my parents to know. So now that I have an opportunity to be a leader in this district, I really want to emphasize the importance of continuously contribute to the work around transforming our schools into culturally responsive institutions where every student feels a sense of belongingness and connectedness. I think since the very beginning, if we set a tone where our kids feel that they belong, that they can connect, then they are setting themselves for success. I also feel that we have a responsibility to be the voice at the table to ensure that district policies and procedures that are being developed or revised are culturally responsive and are taking into consideration the population that we are serving, because we are definitely changing in Washoe County. I also feel that it's not only a responsibility to build the capacity of our families to navigate the system, but also the capacity of our educators. The last thing we want to do is to build capacity in our families, and when they get to our schools, they are faced with the brick wall where they don't go nowhere, and then they feel so disengaged or not welcome in our system. So really supporting schools on creating or enhancing what they already have to sustain a school culture that recognizes, meets, and honors the diverse needs of our immigrant families. They have bring so much with them that if we take the time to listen and honor what they have to offer, we can definitely build better schools for our kids and better environments where we as a whole community can benefit. I also look at the capacity of our staff around asset-based view. Again, how do we build the culture to add a lens that views diversity, traits, and as a positive thing versus as a deficit? I've seen so many cases, even with my own experience, where they see students from different countries as a deficit for their schools. And, now we're gonna be behind on the tests because we have to accommodate kids that don't speak English versus they come with already some literacy knowledge from their schools that they were before in their countries. How can we build up on that? I also see that this lens can also help us seek the input from our families instead of assimilating families into school norms. So really thinking about, we're not here to assimilate our families, we're here to lift up and hear from them. So really the voice of our families, which I don't have a lot of time today, but I always think about the stages of an immigrant and their involvement in our school system. And there are 4 that in the work of hand has been developed. And I always think about my own experience where my parents came in and I came in with my parents. We were in cultural survivor. We were just trying to get a roof under our heads, food on the table. Education was the main motor to come to this country. And it was the goal, but we needed to get some business done first. So I always think about when I talk to school staff about our families, it's not that they don't care about education, it's that where are they at on their journey? And then eventually we want to create a path for our families to get to a cultural leader, which is the last stage on the diagram of stages of involving our immigrant families. So really thinking through, we're not here to assimilate, we're here to build upon what they bring with them. I also think about the disruption that needs to happen in structural inequities to get families in a way to navigate a complex system. So what can we do as leaders? So when we talk about families, then we can build their capacity and their navigational capital to navigate the complex system we have that is rooted in inequities. So really giving our families an opportunity and the tools to navigate the system by identifying or creating networks for our families to connect resources and learning opportunities for them to build their capacity. Another way or another role that we have is to really promote multimodal communications and language support for our families, having information accessible in various languages, various formats like videos, handouts, workshops to learn their rights and responsibilities, and building how the system works and who are their allies, who can they support them throughout this journey. I also feel that we had to look at again, I go back to asset-based view a lot, and then thinking about how can we strengthen the newcomer family's capacity to support academic achievement, which is our goal as a school district. So not really like how do you navigate the system, but how do you build upon their knowledge to increase their awareness of our institutional programs and the ways that they can support their own child's learning at home. So thinking about that path, like once we're moving towards that cultural leader stage, what can we do as a system? So as a system, we really need to look at through the asset base and really create those opportunities to learn more about how do you support your child's learning at home. Thinking about the collaboration is very essential in our communities. So really identifying community-based organizations and faith-based organizations that can help us create a safety net for our families. Safety net that can support families with resources, programs, and connectedness in their communities. School district, again, our focus is achievement. To get there, we really need to get to know our students. We really need to know their needs. But however, the district does not have all of the resources or the answers. That's why we have to be collaborative and really know our community, know who are the leaders in our community, what organizations we have in our community that can support us to get the kids and the families the support that they need to be successful in our school district. And just briefly, in our school district, we are in the process of revamping our Newcomer Welcome Center, which it will provide families like a hub, a central hub, where they can come and get information about the school, the community. They can feel safe on asking questions, meet other parents, enroll their kids for the first time in our system. And then also it will provide professional learning for our staff to think about the strength of their families, welcoming them into the building, and really thinking about building trustful relationship with families that will support any goals the families have for their kids moving forward in our educational system. So I'll stop there because I know I only have 2 minutes, but I will, if there's any more time, I will love to go back and talk about what our goal is in with the Newcomer Center in Reno.
Thank you so much, Maria. You talked a lot about how there's so many different things that the district does, and really to emphasize around the fact of like, what do parents already coming with, and what does it look like to build both the capacity of not just the families, but the adults who are going to be working with the families in the first place. I can't wait to dive deeper into a lot of these different things that you mentioned in today's conversation. The next question is for Hortensia. So how does your organization engage with local partners to provide support to immigrant refugee families when it comes to navigating the school system?
Yeah, so we knew when we started our community school work that this, as a school, regardless of community school work or not, you're very limited with resources and what the capacity and even your bandwidth of what you can do to serve kids and families from all different backgrounds. And so we knew that we had to really engage our partners, and that's, our most informal champions. So that's even parents that are, great networkers. And so really having that pool of parents to formal champions like our nonprofits, our health sector, our city officials, to really be able to make sure that we were creating systems that were going to impact all of our kids and families. And so when it comes to specifically down to our immigrant and refugee population, one of the best things that we thought we could do is just, for one, provide awareness to our community partners of really getting to know our families, because we had that direct contact with them, really sitting down and having a conversation of what are your biggest barriers to thriving? What are your children's barriers to thriving? If it came down to, why they were being absent, or, absenteeism really gave us a good lens of some of those unknown barriers, dental problems, mental health concerns. And so the more we knew as a school what our families' concerns were or what their barriers were, it was easier for us to have those direct conversations with our community partners that just needed to know. And in reality, they had the resources, but they just didn't know how they could best utilize their time, their effort, their financial means to be able to best impact our kids and families. And so I'll give you an example really quick about one of our nonprofits in the dental field. They used to have a grant program for our senior citizens. And it was really great. It was like a grandparent grant program. If they didn't have health insurance, they would, a grandparent could apply for a $2,000 grant. But we weren't really utilizing that resource. And the more conversations we were having with our dental provider, our dental partner, we said, you know what? We're starting to see a lot more families, newcomer families, immigrant families whose kiddos are not coming to school. And we're figuring out why they're not coming to school. It's because they don't have access to dental care. And so instead of, keep pushing that grandparent grant program, they thought, well, let's now have this for kiddos who don't have any sort of health insurance, or immigrant population, or a refugee population. So now we have that as a direct resource. And it all came really because they weren't aware of the need, but because we had built those relationships with our families, and they were expressed that as a need, as a concern, that really prevented them from coming to school and then, being able to thrive in the classroom. Our partner then re-strategized the way that they were using that resource. And it really comes back to that awareness piece of being able to getting to know your community, and then being able to bring partners to the table that, maybe they've been doing something for 10, 15 years, but once they're invited to part of the conversation of saying, let's rethink the way we do things to better serve our kids and families, they really took that challenge on of saying, you know what, let's go ahead and look at this differently. And that's a perfect example of, just that awareness piece, and then restructuring the way they do things to impact our kids and families, specifically our immigrant families in our district.
Thank you so much for talking about that, Hortensia, especially from like the community schools and being someone who's at the school and building in those partnerships, right? Just that first piece of like, how do you just ask your families, what do they need? What are your hopes and dreams? What are your barriers to accessing some of these resources? And then also having those partnership relationships, right? And then being able to have those conversations with your partners around, hey, like this is what we're hearing from our families. Here's what they need. And then that pushing our partners to then ensure that they're creating the resources for these families around what they need. So thank you so much for just highlighting like at the school level as well, what those partnerships could look like to best support our families. The next question is for both Nora and Amber, and it's, what specific support services or programs your organizations offer to immigrant and refugee families in their interactions with schools?
So thank you for that question, Sabrina. So in Identity, we work very closely with Montgomery County government and Montgomery County Public Schools to have a seamless integration of services. So the kids have been arriving on buses from the southern part of our country to arriving on planes. And so they come into Montgomery County and to a welcoming center. And we at the Bienvenidos Project, which is a project that is in collaboration with Identity and 7 other organizations, community-based organizations, provide help with the enrollment process at the school district. We sign them up right away to the Parent View account so that they can easily access parent information. The Parent View account is like any other school district's IT communication. Some have ConnectEd and other types of programs. Our particular account has the ability to translate all of the teacher languages, messages into their home language. So it is a very big plus for Montgomery County Public School students. So a teacher can actually message a parent and it comes up into whatever language the parent has selected. So we teach parents how to use those accounts so they're aware of the various applications, farms forums, applications for high schools, applications for different groups exactly have to do. We also, at that point in time, offer an assessment to determine what their needs are in terms of housing, health, medical, food, job, and then we offer referrals to county services and programs. We also assign them a case manager. And so then the case manager brings them into an identity program. We have elementary, middle, and high school programs, and also for the kids that are older or have decided to drop out of school, we have a disconnected youth program that is 18 to 25, and we have an adult program. And so we offer anything from GED classes, ESOL classes, workforce development. And so we work very closely with the school. The school system has set up in each of their receiving schools warm person where they can connect with the family. There is orientations. We have a lot of newcomers coming who are speaking indigenous languages from Central America. So we partnered with a colleague of Laura Sanaya's, the Maya League, and the Maya League provided interpretation so that we could have videos on orientation in their home languages. So it's a very cohesive program. It is not perfect. There's a lot of work. The work is only as meaningful and impactful as the people that are implementing it. So what that means is that you have to have continuous conversations, you have to have coordination meetings, you have to have a high level of trust between partners, and you have really good structures to communicate and address new needs as they come along. For instance, we've been having a lot of the overflow of the buses that are coming to the DC area, and to the point that we couldn't enroll kids fast enough into schools. So one of the things that we discussed and addressed was housing people in temporary housing in hotels. But we knew that that was not a very good option for families whose parents needed to find jobs and who were trying to find places to live. So Identity put together youth programming for the kids who were living in the hotels, and we took them and we gave them an orientation of their community, their new community. We took them on field trips. We talked about what did it mean to leave people behind? What were they scared of? We did a lot of work around social emotional learning because we wanted to make sure that the kids understood that they were going to be welcomed into their new community, and also understood that it was okay to miss the people they left behind. And it was okay for them to have questions, feel confused, be frustrated, and be angry. So we provided recreational opportunities. We provided some social emotional learning opportunities. And we also gave them a really good time taking them to the pools and the museums. And we're very lucky because we're only about 15 minutes away from the National Mall. So they got to go to all the Smithsonian's for free, which is always a good plus for us. So those are some of the ways I think that government, schools, and nonprofits can work together to solve very complex problems. But it really takes a group of organizations, 8 organizations who happen to have been working together for over 25 years. And so who had a very high level of trust among them. And already we're on almost a daily communication to set up a program that was successful.
Thank you so much for that, Nora. And then a lot of people are actually asking, what was the application that you used for the translation services?
It's not an application for translation services. It's an application for communication, and it's called Parent View, and it's parent and then VUE. And within that application, the parent can choose the language they want to receive information in. And so it is something that your school district purchases, and it is built into the program so that teachers and parents can have two-way communication, the teacher in English and the parent in their home language.
More so around the one where you had the Mayan translation, was it an organization or?
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yes. So we work with the president of the Maya League, which is, she happens to be my neighbor, but she's wonderful. And also what they do is they organize indigenous speaking community members across the United States to provide interpreting and translation support for Indigenous communities. And so what they did is they helped to record orientation videos for our families so that they can understand what is the routine for riding a bus, what's the routine for inclement weather, these types of things that we take for granted because either we grew up here or we've been in schools forever, right? It's not how everybody else in the world does it. So you do need to have some sort of orientation on what parents need to know. And this information was put in their language. So, and it was the 3 largest language, indigenous languages here in Montgomery County.
Thank you so much for that. And then just to let everybody know, it's Montgomery County in Maryland, because I know we have various Montgomery counties out there. And how about you, Amber?
Yeah, thank you. So kind of segueing with what Nora was saying, staying on the topic of parents, right? So one of our programs we offer several programs and services that are geared toward connecting our families with what's going on in the education system. But one program in particular is our parent advocate training. So the parent advocate training, it's a training program pretty much. And even though it has the title parent, we know that our communities are full of everyone, right? So when we think of parent, we're thinking really the family. Whoever that person may be, it may be a family advocate, it may be the oldest sibling, it may be the actual parent, it may be a guardian grandparent, whoever the person is that's going to have the most interaction with the school. We were doing it standalone, and then we brought in the school district, which is a DeKalb County school district for us. And we started doing these parent advocate trainings to where we taught parents, family advocates, whoever, the basics of how to navigate the United States school system. And then outside of that, how do you navigate this at the state level, at the local level? How do you communicate with your teachers? How do you use this thing called Class Dojo or whatever apps, the teachers are using? But the things, as Nora said, that we take for granted if we've been in this traditional school setting are things that some of our families are not used to, or just even if you're just new, not just to the country, but just to the state, you may not know how to navigate the school system here. So the other idea too is to really use the parent advocate training to help parents find their voices and amplify their voices. We understand that we have scenarios where our parents may not be as fluent in English, so they may depend upon the oldest sibling to do a lot of the interpretation and translation for them. And in the midst of that, what we find out from a lot of parents and from the instructors is that they feel like the parents have lost their voice, or the parent feels like they are powerless when they are speaking to a school official and they're directing every question, every comment to the child and not to the parent, right? So the idea is to use this platform, this training to help our parents find their voice and let them know you do have a voice and you have to say in your child's education, regardless of your language, regardless of your background. And then we go over the history of education within the United States, what policies came about to shape the education and the services that you see now. And in the idea to help show our families that, yeah, you may go through a struggle now, but believe there are other people who've gone through this before as well, and you can do it. You never know who your allies may be, you never know who your opponents may be, but the idea is for them to use that as a way to not only understand the school system, but once they get to a level where they're ready to really advocate on behalf of their child's education at a higher level, they can understand the process and what it looks like. Additional services we offer is our family engagement pieces. So we incorporate the family engagement piece into a lot of our programs. So you'll see that a part of our after school program, our summer camps as well. But the idea is to always include the family as a unit, because if the family is succeeding, the child is succeeding. We can't just focus on the child, right? And so a part of the family engagement pieces, we have a lot of family engagement nights. We have panels, advisory councils that our parents serve on, and so that their voice has always been heard and they're aware of not only what we're doing as an organization, but what impact do they want us to have on the community and vice versa. And so we use those moments to connect, to get surveys, suggestions, ideas of what it is that our parents want to see. Instead of us bringing the services to them that we think that they want, they tell us what they need, right? And I think that's something that sometimes we can do as nonprofits, right? But it's good to really know what they need instead of what we think that they need. Also, LOT, Leaders of Tomorrow. So we are a Leaders of Tomorrow site through IEL, right? And so we've really utilized that program because we do know that a lot of our older siblings, our students, are the voice in their household when it comes to education. So why not amplify the voices of the students and make sure that they're heard as well, because they can make just as a significant impact on their education sometimes before the parent can. And that can also cause the parent to get more involved into this child's education. With our most recent graduates, two of the issues that they identified that they want to tackle is helping their parents form a PTA in their school, as well as themselves forming their own SGA, their own student government. And that's something that they're still actively working on. And the idea is to make sure that the students not see the schools or school districts as an enemy, but more so as an ally. And what part do you play in getting the resources that you need within your school? We know that equity doesn't exist everywhere, right? And so this is also a mechanism for our students, not just our students, our parents, to really get the equity that they seek within their schools.
Thank you so much, Nora and Amber. You guys talked a lot about how nonprofits can support families when navigating the school system, right? And one of the pieces being like, how do you actually build relationships with the district so that they turn to you all to support the families? Because sometimes you all have the expertise to support this population. And we know that schools and districts can't do it all. And we have to, rely as well on our partners. And as well, Amber, the piece around advocacy, right? It is so important that we build the skill sets of both our families and our students so that they can also ask for what they need. And how do we, as nonprofits, as schools, as districts, actually ask our parents, hey, what do you need? Before I create this program that I think would be great for you, let me actually ask you and center your voice so that I'm then creating the right resources and supports that best serve your needs. So thank you all for that. Laura, my next question goes to you in terms of what are the kinds of capacity building and training that you provide to practitioners around best supporting immigrant and refugee youth and families within the school system?
Thank you, Sabrina. Yeah, so much. I will try to piggyback also on kind of tie in what some other folks have said. I mean, I think this is kind of obvious, but really a lot on just kind of understanding the backgrounds of our students and families, right? So often one of the slides, for example, that we include in a lot of our trainings is just going over what is the difference between immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker, someone who has, let's say, undocumented, mixed status, humanitarian parole. Sometimes it seems like we're getting into the weeds, but we're really not, because especially for those of you who are like community school coordinators and that type of thing, if you're working with someone, let's say an Afghan student and family who came last year, they very likely came on humanitarian parole, and what they have access to is very different than what maybe someone who has refugee status, right? Or someone who is undocumented or this and that. So we kind of break that down, and everybody always says like, oh, wow, I never understood the differences. Thank you for clarifying that, right? So we start with the basics, and then we do a lot of partnering. I really appreciate that, like Nora's here and Amber, we do a lot of partnering with local community-based organizations, or sometimes we'll work with a local community to pull together maybe like a parent panel or a panel of older students or something like that. But a lot of times it is kind of pointing people back to the expertise in their own backyard. And I think sometimes, how do I say this? Sometimes I think a lot of our education revolves around understanding the systems that our refugee and immigrant students and families are involved with. And that then kind of leads into best identifying the partners. So for example, if you have, let's say you're in a district where you mostly have Latino students, and then you have a few, let's say, Congolese students thrown in there. Well, I can tell you that likely your Congolese students came as refugees. They're very, numbers wise, they're one of the largest refugee populations coming now. So they're likely, your community partner is going to be more of like a Catholic Charities or maybe a Lutheran or International Rescue Committee or something like that. But for lots and lots of different reasons that we don't have time to get into today, most Latinos in many cases do not come in as refugees. So your community partner for that is going to be different. So you have to kind of understand how these different systems work, or at least the basics, so that you kind of understand who to partner with. Also, one thing I really wanted to emphasize, maybe someone else said this, but I don't know if I heard this. I think when we're thinking about training and we're thinking about, I think the question earlier, like way back for Maria, when you were talking about district leaders, I think the most important thing, one of the most important things that we need to emphasize is that supporting these populations is not just the responsibility of the EL, ESL, ESOL, ML, whatever you call it in your district, their responsibility, right? All too often, it's like, oh, whoop, that's Maria's job, or that's this person's job, or that department. It has to be all hands on deck. And so in the context of family engagement, what I sometimes see in our work is you might have a district that has a really great family engagement department, but they might not know, honestly, a whole lot about their English learner, multilingual learner, immigrant, refugee populations. Then over here, on the other side, you might have a really strong, English learner, multilingual learner department. They understand, all the cultures and linguistic backgrounds of students and families, but they might be really disconnected from their family engagement department, or kind of not so tuned into best practices and strategies for family engagement. So a lot of times, even though we're this outside organization from Washington, D.C., we're often like trying to bring, whether it's departments within one school district, or maybe again, silos between some nonprofit org and the school, like we're trying to bring and convene and, get folks to collaborate, because that's, I think, probably a clear message among everyone here today, is that collaboration piece between partners. So that's a little bit, I could go on and on, but I guess that's some of the key points I wanted to make.
Thank you so much for highlighting that, Laura, especially around the piece of, we put people from different countries in one box, and reality is that there's a difference in differentiation in terms of services and supports, whether it be for undocumented, migrant, refugee, when we think about the different statuses that do show up. This question is to all of you all, which is, what challenges have you faced when supporting newcomer and immigrant families in navigating the school system? And how have these challenges been addressed? Whoever would want to go first.
Well, I will say that one of the biggest challenges in our school system in Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland is the largest school district in the state of Maryland. That's about 168,000 students. And the biggest challenge for us is really making sure that families understand key decision points. So orientation and entry into a school may be very smooth, but then sustaining that relationship and making sure that that parent continues to receive the support to make critical decisions about their children's education. So that's something that Identity has been working on a lot over the last 2 years. And we are working actually closely with our school district, who will be rolling out this school year academic milestones that each student needs to hit. So pre-K, kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade. And we are working to develop a cohesive workshop for parents to understand what those key milestones are, and which questions to ask for support when their kids are not reaching those milestones. But it is a very difficult job for parents to understand every single thing. One of the things that happens is that school districts flood parents. It doesn't matter who you are with information, and you don't know how to prioritize the information or how to act upon the information. And so immigrant parents will miss out on very important decisions because they don't know how to discriminate the difference between choosing which lunch plan and choosing which school. And those are two very different implications for that student. And so it becomes really important to guide the parent through that. And at Identity, we have a Parent Leadership Academy, and we are training parent leaders to then go and replicate our program in schools, because we can't get into all 209 schools, but that is the biggest challenge.
Anyone else wants to chime in?
I'll chime in. I think that so the topic of language access has been touched on by everyone at one point or another, but I just want to really emphasize that, it's federal law to provide parents with information in a language they understand. It's not just like, oh, that's a nice idea. No, it's federal law. And, interpretation is oral, translation is written. We need to know what what services we're seeking. And I can tell that just from the frantic comments about parent view, when Nora mentioned that, everybody's, desperately trying to figure out how to do that. And I think apps have a role to some extent, but if you're in a district where you're only relying on talking points, for example, which is another app that a lot of people like, or you're only relying on Google Translate, that's kind of an uh-oh situation. You really need to have an advocate for, right, some in-person or interpretation by actual trained interpreters, or at least get a contract with a phone interpretation vendor so that there's trained interpreters. Anyway, you could check out also our website. We do a lot of trainings that cover language access and kind of how to provide what we're supposed to be doing. So that's kind of what I would add to that question.
Thank you, Laura. And I think just to emphasize that, it's also asking our parents when we think about language, like what's the best way to provide them that translation service, right? Because oftentimes we assume that if we have it written in a specific language that all families know how to read it because that's their native tongue, right? But that's not always the case. And sometimes it works better for our families to have someone actually talk to them. And so just keeping sometimes those pieces in mind when supporting our immigrant refugee families. I'd love for maybe you, Maria, to also chime in and talk about how do you at the district maybe break down some of the silos, especially in Reno, around like the different departments centering immigrant refugee families?
Yeah, for sure. So I briefly mentioned at the end of my turn at the beginning, the Newcomer Welcoming Center that we're going to be launching this year. And everything started because as a family engagement leader, I do a lot of work around engaging families, and my passion is immigration. And because I'm an immigrant myself, I have multiple times I had family voice at the center where a lot of those conversations where we need this, we need that. However, we are a big system and there are other colleagues that are working towards the same goal. So we had decided to create a committee, and the committee was not only family engagement folks, but also the English language department that we have internally, the communications department, and then we look at the international center, the also refugee settlement program, and then we also expanded to another community-based organization that works with immigrants. So we really put all of our thinking caps together and saw the need of not being in silos anymore, because we are all trying to do the same thing and with limited budgets. So we started defining, what are we trying to reach? And as everybody knows, we're a school system, achievement, making sure our kids are successful, they graduate from our high schools, college and career ready. How do we get there? We back it up into, we need to start working in collaboration to support our families. So thinking about how do you do that process, it's more about really the empathy and the understanding that not all of our families might be able to read the content. Some of our families, like you mentioned, will like videos. Some of our families will like a conversation. So really thinking about, what will benefit the most our community. So as a school system, we're thinking about, and we already started the work, even though it hasn't been implemented yet, we haven't opened the doors of this Welcome Center. We started by creating videos of how do we make sure that the families that are coming in understand the basics of how the school system works. So we created videos in 4 different languages that I'll be happy to share a YouTube link to it. And it's based on the languages that are more spoken from our families that are coming in. We translated documents into 14 different languages. We picked the most important documents that can make a difference, because again, budget is tight. And we decided here are the most, based on conversations having with families, based on our own experience, this is what families can benefit from. So we put out 14 different languages, documents on those languages for families to access. We also have a colleague of mine that works in the ELL department. Her name is Holly. She has done some of this work on her own in terms of like when we have a newcomer, regardless if they're refugee or an immigrant or here in asylum, she goes over the basics, like a one-on-one. And we are able to do that because we are contracted with the Northern Nevada International Center, and they provide different access to different languages. And, you know, it's not like an everyday conversation we have. I know it's costly, but at least we try to make the home visit to support the families bilingual in their language, so yeah, they understand. But also, like Laura mentioned, it is the right to have interpretation. So we do have, in the other side, we let schools know that if they need an interpreter that is other than Spanish and is not available on their school site, here's the phone line you can call and you can access the phone interpretation right then. Again, we are not a perfect system. We still have issues where even though we have these resources, there's some schools that are not there yet in equity. So I will say some of the information is not translated as school site based, you know, which creates challenges for our families because it's not on their own language. We have issues with schools discouraging families from enrolling their kids, especially if they're in high school. You know, they're like pushing them to like a GED program or like outside the district. So I think it is important that we keep doing this work. It's not an easy work. As some of my colleagues already mentioned, it's a lot of work, takes a lot of energy. But at the end of the day, we need to think about the kids and why are we here as an education system or business is here to support all kids regardless of who they are, where they're coming from. And if we want to talk about equity, then this is a way to address some of the inequities in our system by making sure that we are leading with empathy, that making sure we're leading with the end goal in mind, which is supporting every kid that walks in the door. So really thinking about how do we shift mindsets on our school district is really part of this Newcomer Center will be professional learning that will target implicit bias as well as not so much implicit biases that we have sometimes, the judgments, educating or staff, like some of my colleagues already mentioned, of when we talk about newcomers or immigrants or refugees, it's not just putting everybody of color in one category. You know, we are from different areas, we have different knowledge, we have different skills, we also have different needs. And sometimes it can get scary when you talk to someone about different needs because then they're thinking, it's just one of me or a staff of 20, how can I support many different needs? But if you think about the work is not as heavy as it is if you collaborate with others, if you're willing to let that vulnerability piece come out and really work with the end mindset, which is all of the kids deserve an education.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. And really around the piece of like, it's something that everyone needs to do, not just one department, not just one person who has a title around family community engagement, but it's something all of us really need to be able to think about and be able to do, especially around shifting our own mindsets and understanding that it is not one picture of immigrant or refugee, but a plethora of it in terms of identities and challenges, and how do you go about in terms of resources and things that they need. I know, Laura, you wanted to quickly chime in on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one quick thing based on something in the Q&A. Earlier, when I was talking about the differences between immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker, and so on, I was not suggesting that we ask an individual student what their status is. That is, against federal law. We don't ask students their immigration status. I was simply trying to explain or emphasize the importance of kind of understanding the terms in general so that we have a sense of how our students come to us, because that's going to make a big difference in how we support them and then the community partners we work with. Stop there.
Thank you for that, Laura. I'm going to go.
Can I just add one thing? The reason why you want to partner with a community-based organization is because we don't have the same type of federal restrictions that school districts do. So for instance, someone was asking about our needs assessment, and we do a needs assessment and we find out what the parents' ACEs scores, adverse childhood experiences scores are. We find out whether the family is documented or undocumented. And the reason why we're finding that information out is because we know what the resources are in our community and which programs they can have access to. So, and which ones they have to be a U.S. resident for, and which ones are for anyone, the undocumented as well. So we have a very frank conversation with the families, and we explain to them why we need the information, and all of our information is kept confidential. But one of the reasons to partner with a nonprofit is because as a school district, you can't ask those questions. And believe it or not, if you're trying to find housing, if you're trying to find food, if you're trying to find healthcare, those questions are important and you have to ask them because you can't find resources to help the family otherwise.
Thank you so much, Nora, for pointing that out. And just due to time, I'm going to ask one last question before we open it up for Q&A, which is what strategies, innovative approaches, and best practices have schools, district, community-based organizations employed to collaboratively support newcomer and immigrant families? And I'd love for Hortensia and Amber to maybe start us off with that question.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to tackle it. I would say become a community school. You know, that's an easy, straightforward answer. But no, it really has given us an advantage. So, for example, our district has 6 elementaries. 3 of them are community schools, 3 of them are not. And we do have an advantage comparatively to our other non-community schools. And that is that we have a specific individual housed in those 3 buildings who is tasked with really creating these systems that will target these barriers for our families. But not only that, our community school coordinator is part of like the welcome team in our building. And so, you know, whenever we have a new family transition or, you know, arrive to our school, they're one of the very first people that they meet. So those relationships that they build with our families are key to the success for their children. And even as a family as a whole unit, so being able to know somebody in the building that may not have the answers, but knows how to get them for you or can connect you with the resource is essential for any new family. So, you know, if it was for me, you know, every school would be a community school, but it is helpful to have somebody in the building who kind of doesn't have, you know, if we try to put that on our administrator's plate or our school counselor's plate or who else, you know, or, you know, somebody mentioned, you know, our ELL teacher, you know, isn't everything to everyone, you know, being able to have an additional resource in the building to be able to create those relationships and be able to then funnel to different resources and connections really helps increase the success for our families.
Well, we are hoping to become a community school at some point, but in the meantime, working with our current school district, they have a division called Family Impact Hub. And so by partnering with them, we're able to access a lot more of the schools. And with that, pretty much like you were saying earlier, we're working with the school districts in getting parent liaison positions incorporated within the schools, instead of it being a person who has the title, but they're being pulled to do 5 or 6 different things. That's currently what's going on right now. And then just kind of being a resource to them in the terms. So we get invited to speak at a lot of professional development opportunities that the local schools have, and not making the assumption that just because the school is based in your area, that they understand the needs of the community or that they understand what exactly is going on within the community. And just a brief background, our community, we are located in what we call Resettlement City. Some people know us as the Ellis Island of the South. And so we have a large refugee and immigrant population here. And even though the schools have been here forever, we're coming to find out that a lot of the administrators and teachers who've been teaching the schools here for maybe 10 plus years have no idea of the connections or the lack of connections or the cultural responses to things that are going on within our community. So just being open and being available and being mindful that just because they've been here doesn't mean that they definitely know everything that's going on, just being that resource, because at the end of the day, the school district is not your enemy. You have to figure out ways to work together, and just don't assume that they're going to be the end all be all to all the solutions in the community. You have to work with CBOs, or community-based organizations, to really see the impact that you want to have in the community.
Laura, Maria, Nora, anything you guys would like to add?
I'll say for me, like I mentioned, we're in the process of the newcomer, so hopefully I can stay connected and tell you more about it. But in the meantime, I think one of my biggest thing, innovative for me, because I think it's very important, is that whatever you're trying to do, really connect with families and center their voice in whatever you're trying to do. I will say for the newcomer, I did run focus groups to just understand a little bit more about, the families, listening to their experiences, their challenges, things that they wish they knew, especially because the focus group I run, I invited not only newcomer families, but also families that were part of the ELL population that at one point were newcomers. So really thinking about how do we serve all of our multilingual learners at the end of the day. And I really wanted to know more about what are the things that they wish they knew, the resources they wish they had at that point, and then thinking about if you were brand new, like what are the challenges, experiences. And if I look back when I was a newcomer here, if somebody asked me, what are the resources you need, I will probably be like, I don't know, I'm grateful I have an education, or my parents will say the same thing. So I think there are definitely different needs within the newcomer community. So really trying to get as much as information from families, and also the follow-ups. So I think it's very important not to only host listening sessions with our families, but also letting them know how the information is going to get used, and keeping them up to date or where we are on the process, because same families that came can also be our parent ambassadors at one point when we're ready to launch. And I think that also creates a sense of belongingness and ownership of like, I was part of the initial of the project, but also I can also keep continuing coming back and contribute to this amazing program. So I'm just thinking about, it's not going to be perfect, but also I feel that sometimes we spin our wheels on our offices trying to think what our families need or want. And especially we're immigrants ourselves, we think, some of the things are the same, because I feel like we're taking some step backs in this country. But and I can see some of the things I struggle with, people still struggling with, but I think that's why I'm here trying to support and, make more allies and really express that the importance of like supporting all of our families. But also thinking about, when we meet with families and listen to families, to honor what they have to bring, because they do bring different perspectives, and that can help us promote cross-cultural understanding and strength of the skills that our kids are going to need in this new era, because things change. And I think no one knows their kids more than the families. And also whatever they're coming from, they come with assets. And some of our countries are more advanced in pieces, more than the US. And sometimes we tend to not see that quickly. When I came here, I was super advanced in math, and they didn't see that in the system. So I feel like I was an owner for what I had to bring to the table. So I think that's also why I always think about what do our families come with, and how do we build upon what they're coming with.
Thank you so much for that. I think one of the pieces I want to highlight where you talk about, as we center our families' voices, right, is ensuring that like when we do give them an opportunity to tell us what they want and need, how are then we acting upon it? Because when that doesn't happen, we often lose trust within our families, because it's like, what's the point of saying how I feel or what I need if in the end you're not going to do anything about it? So it's really important that as we create that space to center our families and their voices, that we actually follow up and then ensure that the things that they're asking for, that we're actually doing that. And I think the other piece around the fact of how do we really recognize and raise up the assets that our families bring into our communities, and have them recognize you have value, you have something to bring, rather than it's all deficit mindset of here's what you need, here's what you got to learn, and X, Y, and Z. Before I turn it over to you, Anthony, I'd love, just because of a conversation me and Nora had, Nora, for you to talk about how we know the intersection between youth that are immigrants and refugees also are youth that have disabilities at times, right? And you all sometimes sit in on IEP meetings and provide supports to those young folks that also do have a disability, but also is an immigrant refugee. So if you can speak a little bit about that, and then I'll turn it over to you, Anthony, for Q&A.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes our identity program unique, to be honest, is the fact that I've been a district level administrator. So I usually attend IEP meetings when asked by our families. So I'm and I used to work for an equity center. So it's very hard to get one over on me because, I've been working in the space for 28 years and I've worked with the Office for Civil Rights. I've worked with the Department of Justice and I've worked with state departments of education. So when we enter a meeting, it's always in a collaborative way, first of all, because I may be able to get the school to give the parent a win in the moment, but they have to live at the school, right? So let's always talk about how we need to build collaborative relationships because we will always need to be in accord with school district employees, even those who don't always see the benefit of involving parents. So one of the things that is really important, and I put this into the chat, is there are several regional technical assistance centers whose whole responsibility is to provide guidance around special education services. So there are the PTACs, the Parent Involvement Technical Assistance Centers for Special Education. They often, in communities that are multilingual, they have multilingual employees. These are free technical assistance providers. They have a grant through the U.S. Department of Education, so you can get those resources for free. You also all live in states where you have an equity center, technical assistance center. So a technical assistance, the equity centers provide free information and resources to school districts and states. And so you reach out to them and you ask them for help because they have been funded to help you. So you're not asking for anything that they shouldn't be providing. Many of them have many hands-on toolkits and guides, but the best thing you can do is really find a disabilities organization that works for kids with disabilities in your state or in your community and ask them if they would be interested in starting something for you. Because the fact is, what special education services are needed for immigrant students in Minnesota is very different than what is needed in Maryland, because our immigrant populations and the majority of the immigrant populations there are a little different. So it's really important to tailor the information you get to the communities you have. So having an advocate go and accompany a parent is always really super important. Also, the U.S. Department of Education has many parent guides to help you understand the IEP process in multiple languages, because again, it's a federal requirement. So you can go to the U.S. Department of Education's website and look up those parent guides as well. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much for that. And I'll also just put in a plug-in. I know Kwesi talked about our RAMP program, which is our Ready to Achieve mentoring program. It is a career-focused mentoring program for youth with disabilities. And we also at the same time have started immigrant refugee youth that also have disabilities within that and have been really intentional on thinking about what does sometimes those supports look like when it's different, right? Because of the intersection of our identities and how that shows up and plays a role. So you guys can also look into that program as well. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Anthony, for Q&A.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you all. We have received so many questions, and unfortunately, we're not going to have time to get to all of them, but we're going to take a couple here. Before I do that, though, just to everyone that is still on, if we don't get to your question, we will do our best as part of the follow-up to get you some answers. A lot of you have asked for links to the various sites and resources and things that people have shared today. We will do our best also to include that as part of the follow-up post-webinar email that we'll be sending out by the end of the week. So know that we'll get together as much as we possibly can because we know how important all of this is. So look for that. Again, we've got time for just a few quick questions here. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll down. Here we go. So we talked a little bit about those of you that do home visits with families and conduct those on site with families. Question came through around when you do those visits, are you using any sort of a curriculum or any sort of an agenda when you go in and meet with those families? And are there any specific resources that you might know of that can be accessed to help individuals that are doing those types of visits? And I'll open that up to whoever would like to answer that.
So go ahead, Maria, you go ahead.
So I will speak to two really quick because I want Nora to also share. We follow the parent-teacher home visit model from Sacramento. And the first visit that we do is about just listen to our families' hopes and dreams. And we just get to know our families. The second visit that we go back to do is we connect them back to a resource or a skill that was identified. So if we're talking about a home visit to an immigrant family and something comes up on the conversation about access to higher education, the second time we go back, we bring information about and also a contact that can support them on that transition. When I talk about my colleague, she does another type of home visits, and that's more for like refugee families. So she goes in and it's more about like almost the same model, but it's not as fidelity. It's about also getting to know the families. What are their needs? What do they need help? And most of the time is food or shelter because they need to find a place, clothing, sometimes it's furniture. You know, we go back to that model of like they're in survival mode right now, and she supports them with that, but also helps build that relationship because they know Holly can support them with other things as well in the system.
You took one of the best resources. The parent-teacher model is a wonderful model. It's national, and we really support it. Another one is Parents Ask Teachers program has a home visiting model and curriculum as well. It's very similar, but it is a little bit different. It has more hands-on training. In identity, we do home visits, but ours are all tailored to the instruments that we have developed over years in partnership with the University of Maryland. I think one of the things that is so important about what Parent Home Teacher Project does is that it does start with getting to know you. It is really hard, you all, to tell someone who you just meet your whole life story, right? So, and also it's very humbling experience for some to say, I'm about to be evicted, or we're running out of food at the end of the month. So I think the most important thing that can guide you in developing these home visiting curriculums or home visiting protocols is common sense, right? How would you want someone to treat you if you were in any of these situations? What questions would you want someone to ask you, and what needs to be in place before you're even willing to have that conversation with someone? Because I'm not going to answer questions about myself, really deep personal questions about myself with someone I don't know and who just has walked through my door. So I think sometimes we get really bogged down in the curriculum and we forget sort of the very basic sense of, if you're inviting someone over for a meal, you don't start asking how much they're getting paid, right? So let's be a little bit mindful of how we start our conversations with the people we're trying to serve.
Really great point. Thank you both, Nora and Maria. I'm going to ask, I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking, do we have time for this? But it is a really important question. And I think a lot of people would want to know your responses to, and again, I'll open it up to everyone who wants to respond here. But as we close today, with the current political environment here in the country, how is the divide affecting the work that you are doing, or that your organizations are doing, or that you're seeing others do in their schools, in their communities? How has that shifted, and how do you shift that? And Laura, I saw your hand go up, so I'll let you lead us off here.
Sure. I'll just say this. We started up in 2017 for a reason. And, you know, I think that it's really important to address that elephant in the room, which is often there, right? Teachers are a subset of population. So do we encounter anti-immigrant sentiment in our work with educators? Yes, of course. And rather than kind of like shoving it under the rug or using some cute words related to equity, cultural responsive, and this, that, and the other, we just talk about it. Like, we just dive right into it rather than avoiding it. You have to, otherwise, you know, it's just not going to work. So I don't know. That's my thought. I really love going into districts where like some high administrator has warned me, hey, things are kind of contentious here. And I don't know. I'm from the Midwest. I'm used to there being, you know, debates about things and maybe not everybody on the same page. So I kind of thrive in that. And so I like kind of bringing everyone to the table and always having that human voice, right? Whether it's, I mean, all of our team at Immigrant Connections pretty much are either immigrants or children of immigrants, most of the trainers. And again, we do a lot of partnering with local orgs so we can have local voices and bring that human to human connection to help break those stereotypes down.
Great. Anyone else want to? Nora, please.
I would just say that for us, it has actually inspired new partnerships. So unfortunately, the climate, the politicized climate of hate is directed at multiple communities. And so there's some intersectionality of goals there. And so, for instance, at Identity, we've partnered with the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, because there's a rise in anti-Semitism here. So the NAACP, Identity, and JCRC can unify and come out with a unified statement about how we don't want hate in our community. I think it's really important that other marginalized groups in the community band together and voice that hatred of all kinds is not okay. And it provides us with a lot of opportunities. And we're very thankful to the funders that have recognized how much harder the work is and started giving more.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura and Nora, both for that. Again, we could keep going. We have so many great questions. Obviously, this has been a topic that resonates with so very many. So, but we have reached our time. So we're going to have to wind up here. I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a moment, or stop the view here, because I do want to share my screen to go over a few other quick items as we close out. First and foremost, if you have any questions post-webinar, there's some contact information on the screen there. You can reach out to either us here at Welcoming America at events@welcomingamerica.org, or you can also reach out to IEL. It would be Sabrina, and her email is there on the screen as well. So feel free to make note of that. Once again, all of this today has been recorded. We're going to share this resources, all of the information with you. Our speakers have been sending over various resources and links and their information. So we're going to compile all that and put it all into the email that we'll be sending out to you. Again, expect that probably by the end of the week. We'll have that over to you, and it will go out to not only those of you attending today, but everyone that will be that was registered as well. So everyone will get that. And then also just want to point out, if you want to follow either Welcoming America, these are our social channels. You can search for us on the various socials there, and also IEL in their channels as well. So again, in closing, just an enormous thank you to everyone, Kwesi and Sabrina at IEL, and every one of our speakers today, Hortensia, Laura, Olivia, Maria, Amber, Nora. Thank you all so much. This has just been such great information. And again, much needed information. I'm sure the conversation will keep going, and we will share that as much as we possibly can. Thank you so very much for all of you attendees for joining us today. We know this 90 minutes is a lot of time, but we appreciate you sticking with us and going through this time with us. Thank you all again for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for the amazing and important work that you do out there within your communities to make sure that everyone does feel like they belong and that they can contribute. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you soon. Take care.